In my opinion, this is probably one of the most important talks here. I mean, everybody will say that about their talk, but I mean, really this gets down to being more sustainable on the planet. I know they had like a zero waste kind of talk in this tent right before this. It's all about, reduce, reuse, recycle, and, there's a lot of food miles on some of the food we're eating. And as you've learned from several of the speakers already at this event, that a lot of the food we may be eating is not nutritious as it once used to be. And I definitely encourage you guys always to shop your local farmers markets and support farmers, but in the end, they're also in it for profit. And most farmers that I meet, there are a few exceptions, are not growing for the nutrition or nutrient quality. And from a lot of the farms I visit, they're not doing really the practices that I believe is really needed to be done to grow the highest quality food. My talk today is entitled, Is it possible to grow enough fruits and vegetables to live on? Actually, the official title was Enough Fruits to Live On. But I added vegetables in there because vegetables are an important part of a fruit-based diet, in my opinion. Some people may disagree with me, but from what I have seen over my 24 years of eating a raw fruit and vegetable-based diet, it's imperative. So how did I get started on raw foods and growing foods? I just want to go briefly into this because that will tell you a history about me and why I think the way I think and why I do the things I do, And so what happened to me was I got spinal meningitis when I was younger, and I was hospitalized and almost lost my life. And the doctor said I might not make it out of the hospital alive. So this is not a fun place to be at any age, especially when you're so young. And that's actually one of my best gifts, looking back on that, is actually getting sick and almost losing my life, as I could honestly say is one of the best things that happened to me, because it put me on my trajectory and my path that I'm on now to live as healthfully as possible and to always improve what I'm doing. And all along my journey, I've always thought when I was in the hospital, I thought how, what's the most important thing right now to me? Is it like money? Is it, all this kind of stuff? And I'm like, no, because I couldn't even buy my way out of the hospital. Even if I had a lot of money. I mean, there's millionaires, billionaires, people that have tons of money and they lose their lives because of their failed health, and all the best medical system in the world, while it's great for certain situations, like major car accidents or something, not good for a lot of the chronic diseases that are afflicting most people living today. And then I just wanted my health back. I then and there thought that, my health is my greatest wealth, and money really doesn't mean much if you don't have your health. I mean, you can't enjoy life, you can't enjoy anything if you don't have your health. And then I thought, how am I gonna build my health up so this does not happen to me again? So I asked the doctor when I left the hospital, because I came through, I can't even say the system, because they had no treatment for me. I can only say I am here today because of higher powers, And when I got out of the hospital, I asked the doctor, why did I get sick in the first place? And he said I had a complement immune deficiency, which is basically a chronically weak immune system. And I had things like allergies and asthma as a child, which are kind of like autoimmune, situations in the body. So I knew I had something maybe not right, and I needed to fix this. And basically he just said, you're kind of screwed, because at that point, we didn't know all this stuff about epigenetics and how what you eat and your lifestyle could affect your genes. And so at that point, I'm like, I didn't want to just take what he said, that I could get sick again with any other disease and not be so lucky next time. I'm like, I have to do something to change my outcome. And so I have to change what I'm doing. And I had no idea what it was. Long story short, because I don't want to talk about my story this whole time, is I found juicing, and I found about raw foods. And all along my journey of juicing and then raw foods, I've always been trying to increase and better what I'm doing all over the years. And it's probably about maybe, I was growing food probably after a couple years after I bought my first house, and then in the periphery, but not in a big way. But then I had this friend, Don Weaver, who has been doing raw fruit-based also from even years before I started. and he's been really into gardening and growing food with this stuff called rock dust. And Don would always be there, John, you got to start growing with rock dust. And he'd say, rock dust, you got to grow with rock dust, and you got to try, you got to do it. And I just never really got it, you know. I just really wasn't interested. And when I talk to people about this stuff, maybe they're not interested either. Maybe they're over at another talk, and that's great. Everybody's ready or not ready at a certain point in time. And so he gave me some of the fruit or vegetables that he grew, actually, because we were at another event, actually in Fort Bragg at a raw food event. And he's like, try these vegetables. And I ate them, like, wow, these are like some of the best I've had. Because it's like, he's like, yeah, I grew it in rock dust, fresh picked, you know, picked it yesterday or whatever. It's like, this is amazing. And then maybe something started to click. I'm like, wow, I started to equate like more nutrition, rock dust, fresh picked, tastes better, and healthier for me. And so like, I'm like, that's all I needed. My key is like, hey, if this is gonna be healthy for you, let's not be exclusive in our diets, let's be inclusive. I'm gonna do it. So then I basically converted my front yard into an all raised bed edible vegetable garden, also with fruit trees on my property. This is in Northern California. And I started that process about 10 years ago, and all during the way I've actually filmed videos of how I started it, how I built it, and what I would plant in the seasons, how I would enrich the soil. And my whole goal and motivation is to how to grow the highest quality food possible. And so I've investigated a lot of different things, and it's not just organic. Just because it's organic doesn't necessarily mean it's more nutritious. It means that it met a certain set of government standards to be certified organic, which has to do with what you could spray on it and what pesticides and fertilizers you can and cannot use for the most part. Also, there's post-harvest practices that are also our rules in organic or conventional. So that's how I got started in growing food, and then since that journey I've been growing food. Well, it's been over 10 years on a big scale, big way. You know, both my properties, I have a property in Northern California, a property in Las Vegas. I have things growing at both properties, although right now my Northern California house has mostly all my fruit trees with very little vegetables because I had a bad tenant, and that's a whole nother topic, so I wasn't going there for a while. But my backyard in Vegas is just totally green. I post pictures on my Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, check me out, Growing Your Greens. I just got up on my fence and like I took a picture of like my neighbors, which is just all rocks, like desert landscaping, and then like mine is just all green and it's like a food forest. It's like totally amazing in the middle of Vegas, you know. And people come over and they're totally amazed. I mean, if you know Marcus Rothkrantz, he made videos in my backyard. Him and Kara were totally amazed. But anyways, to me, it's just normal. This is my lifestyle. I grow food. I harvest food. I eat food. I prepare food. I try to be as healthy as I am or can be. So is it possible to grow enough fruits and vegetables to live on? And my resounding answer is yes, it is totally possible, and not only possible. I know people that are doing it. I've visited many farms and friends with gardens that are actually growing food. One of my friends, actually, his name is Stefan Reeve. He's over in Maui. Does anybody know Stefan? No, yeah. So anyways, he didn't really want to be in my video or anything, but he was gracious enough to let me film his place, and this place inspires me. I was actually at the San Diego Fruit Festival, and one of the questions at the end for a panel discussion was, who inspires you, or what raw foodist inspires you? Everybody had a different person, and I said, nobody's gonna know who this guy, but this is the guy that inspires me, Stefan, because he has a 10-acre, and the title on YouTube for the video, if you wanna watch it, because I can't really get into it, is Tropical Permaculture Fruit Forest Feeds Off-Grid Family. And the link is there on the handout. But basically, I go around his 10-acre property that he's been developing now for 20 years, and it was like just literally just hills in Maui, and he just planted fruit trees, and he has all understory of perennial peanut grass that I saw him put in over the years painstakingly, which is actually covers the ground, which needs no maintenance other than maybe pulling an occasional weed. It creates nutrition for the soil, and he has like 10 acres of literally fruit trees, and he has a small vegetable garden. And if you ever ask me, John, is it possible to eat only a fruit diet with no vegetables and be successful? I'll tell you, I've never met anybody that's done it except for Stefan, who eats 99% fruit. I mean, he really honestly doesn't like vegetables. He has an amazing vegetable garden with really cool vegetables growing, but it's like for his mom, and I never see him hardly eat vegetables. But I will say that Stefan probably has the highest quality fruit of any fruitarian that I've ever met in my life, because he's on, you know, the rich volcanic hills of Hawaii. In addition, he brings in rock dust to add the trace minerals. He does all the right practices to enrich his soil. And then the other thing he does is he chops down trees that the fruit's not good enough. so I was visiting his house, and he's like, oh yeah, John, he's like, I'm like, what's in season? He's like, the rambutans. He's like, well, you can eat as many as you want. I'm gonna cut down that tree, they're not good. So I go over there, I'm like, okay, these aren't good fruit. I pick it and I eat it, and I'm a fruit snob. And I'm like, holy shit, these are some of the best I've had, and to him it's not good enough. He's like, I'm gonna probably put a durian there anyways, but whatever. So anyway, so he totally does it, you know, and that his place inspires me. It's really decorated nice. He has like, you know, a dragon fruit section. He has a section of papayas like that are nestled among rocks. You can see it in the video. He has, you know, like he's growing bamboo for edible bamboo shoots. He has enough coconut trees or palms to like drink coconut water as much as he wants every day. I mean, literally every time I go there, he's in like his coveralls with headphones, listening to ebooks, and he's out working in one part of his farm or another, and I'm sure he's had help over the years. And this is what he likes to do. Maybe he works a little bit. I don't exactly even know what he does for a living, but maybe he's retired, I don't know, but that's the life, you know. And then finally he had his new wife of a couple years, just had a child, so I haven't been there in a couple years, so hopefully gonna visit him this year. But so yes, it's totally possible. And so now the next thing is, okay, so this guy's doing it, so should I even try to grow anything? Because if I can't do it like him and can't grow all my food, it's just worthless. I'm not even gonna do it. I might as well just buy conventional food. I might as well not even eat organic, just, you know, whatever. You know, it's totally, you know, I don't think it's an all or nothing approach. You know, my goal is to have 10 acres like he does in the tropics somewhere where you could harvest different fruits year round and eat. But we're not all in that situation. We don't have enough money to buy 10 acres in Hawaii, maybe unless it's on the Big Island, to do that. And I encourage everybody to do and grow what they can to offset the food miles from the food that you would otherwise have to buy that's getting shipped in. I mean, if you're eating bananas, for example, I mean, on one level that is, it's more sustainable than some other like animal foods that are being shipped in from far away. But you know, on the other level, if you've ever been down to like Costa Rica and you see banana plantations where it's just bananas for miles and miles, and it's just really unsustainable and not the best, you know, use of land. I think the best use of land is like maybe more food forest approach where there's just mixed fruits and vegetables, not monoculture with, you know, borders of different, you know, beneficiary plants for insects and things. We're going to go on a farm tour tomorrow, which we will see kind of some of how they set it up, a more sustainable kind of growing system. So yeah, I would always encourage you guys to do as much as you can. And like, I don't grow all my own food. People, oh, John, you grow all your food. No, I don't grow all my food. I'll be the first to say there'll be days like when I was in California and how my garden and my fruit trees going there'd be days where I just eat all off my property only. And that is possible, but like, it's only when my fruit trees, okay, this fruit tree, my loquat trees are ripe, so I can have loquats today for fruit, and I have all my vegetables and tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers and leafy greens to eat I want, and so I'm good, you know. But how many days did that ever happen? I mean, maybe there's like 5 days that I've only eaten out of my food that I grew on my small residential tract home property. But for the most part, you know, nowadays in Vegas, I grow the majority of my vegetables, especially leafy green vegetables, I eat. But I still buy lots of fruit because fruit trees take up a lot of space, and you know, fruit trees also only produce usually 1 or maybe 2 or 3 times a year, depending on the fruit it is. My goji berries in Vegas will produce like 3 times a year, up to 2 to 3 times a year, which is really nice. But still, like, am I getting all my calories from goji berries? Like, they're small and they're a pain in the ass to pick because they're so damn small, and you got like hundreds of them on the plant, and you're just like, can't get enough of them. And actually, fresh goji berries, they're not as sweet as the dried fruits because the dried fruits are concentrated. So they're actually even like not even that sweet and that good. So usually I just throw them into smoothies. So anyways, so yes. So the other thing is, how long does it take to grow your own food from seed? And that depends on the food, right? Some foods could take as short as 3 days to grow them from seed. Like, what are those? Sprouts, thank you. Yeah, some could be a little bit longer, maybe microgreens, maybe 7 to 14 days or even longer, depending on the microgreen and if it grows fast or not, right? Some fruit trees like a date palm, you know, if you save one of the date pits from one of the dates you guys are eating here, they are viable. They found date seeds or something in like tombs of the pharaohs or some weird stuff, you know, 25,000 years old or something. And they still sprouted and germinated, right? So that's kind of crazy. But anyways, a date palm or a date seed, you could germinate it, which I've actually had them germinate in my compost pile in Vegas. And then I just take them out. I'm like, oh, they're sprouting in the compost. I pull them out and then I put them into a pot. How long is it going to take that date, you know, seed to grow into a tree that is actually going to produce fruit? If it does produce fruit, if it's a male, or if it's a female, not if it's a male. It's going to take 25 years for that date palm to grow food. So you really have to plan carefully. I think growing things from seed is wonderful because you may get a new variety that has been never discovered before that may even taste better, but have new traits that are really cool. But also it can take a lot of time. So, you know, I don't know if you might not have 25 years to wait. Okay, so the next question, the next topic I want to talk about is tropics versus subtropics versus temperate climates, you know, and what's more realistic for trying to grow your own food in, you know, between those different climates. Obviously the tropics, because there's no frost and most plants won't grow really in a frost area. So like in this temperate climate where we're sitting here, probably in the winter, I think there's probably a couple feet of snow here, right? And, you know, fruit trees are not going to grow in the snow. People think, oh, I could grow an avocado. And yeah, it's great to have an avocado here in this climate. But, you know, honestly, you could probably do a lot of work. You could probably bring it in the winter time and take it out. And maybe if you're lucky, it'll fruit. Or you could get temperate climate fruit trees that are used to going dormant, going to sleep in the winter time. The challenge with that arises that, hey, if you're a fruitarian or you're eating a high fruit diet, like what fruits are you going to have in the wintertime that you could actually grow? Unless you have like a big greenhouse that you're actually heating in the winter, or maybe like in Iceland, they have thermal greenhouses, which are actually, they don't have to pay to heat because it's all the hot thermal water, which is really cool. And they had tomatoes when I was there in, I don't know, December. You know, that's probably not going to happen. So I happen to live in a subtropical climate that, you know, we get, it's nice and warm, and then we never get like super cold. So they grow things, you know, subtropical or like, you know, like citrus fruits, you know, no problem. So in a subtropical climate where it doesn't get as cold, there's definitely a lot more options, but still, you know, the winter time is more shy on fruits. And then of course, if you live in a tropical climate, then you have year-round growing. So the challenge arises with the different climates. Like say, like somebody here mentioned, like they live in so-and-so and, you know, you should move so you could buy organic fruit, I think was a comment in one of the other talks. And it's like, should you move to the tropics to be able to grow your food year round? And that's a personal decision. You know, I think I will be going that direction at some point in my life, hopefully fairly soon rather than later. But if you do want to do that, that's great. You can grow year round. But if you don't, then you just say, throw your hands up there. I can't do it. I live in a temperate climate. I'm not even going to try to grow fruit. Well, here's the thing, right? If you grow in a temperate climate, you know, like a certain seasons. I talked to a guy here the other day. Where's he from? Forget. Maybe like Manitoba. He says he has like 111. Yeah, him. He had like, you know, 111 day season.
Yeah, it's zone 3. It's 110 frost-free days.
Oh, 110. I missed it by one day. But yeah, so he has 110 days before he has frost, which means they gotta, in 110 days, they gotta make sure they grow as much stuff as they can. And then at frost, they lose all the plants, like, you know, but then once they grow it, they could bring the crops inside. So for example, if you're eating fruit, you could technically call squashes a fruit. You could grow squashes and they will stay fresh for the wintertime, even without refrigeration. Now, I wouldn't necessarily want to eat a lot of pumpkins and things because they're like high starch, not necessarily high, you know, good sugar. But things like watermelons, you could grow watermelons. They'll last maybe a month after without refrigeration. If you want to grow something like winter melons, how many people have ever eaten winter melons? Cool, yeah, so if you've been to the Asian market, you could find winter melons. They kind of look like a watermelon, and hopefully you'll never buy one thinking it's a watermelon. It has like this white kind of, I don't know, kind of like, it looks mildew or something on it, but that's how it is. But the winter melons are called winter melons because they'll store for 5 months, and they're closely related to the watermelon. The sad thing is that the winter melons, unlike watermelons, are just totally not sweet. They're like more like a cucumber. Nope, they're just called winter melons, totally different. But so that's a good storage fruit, you know. Also, apples. You know, if you lived in this area, one of the things I would grow is apples and pears, because you could grow apples and pears, harvest them, and then keep them in cold storage, and they'll easily last throughout the winter for you. And a matter of fact, industry will store apples, you know, for a full year, you know, under cold storage, proper temperature, and proper climate control, which means for them excluding the oxygen from the refrigeration, you know, where the apples are being stored. Now, I'm not going to say that's best for nutrition, but if you don't want to move to the tropics and you want to be able to grow all your own food, these are the things that you kind of got to think about, you know. So root crops, you know, vegetables, root crops are great for storage. You could harvest them and store them, but even better yet, for root crops here, you would just grow root crops in your 110 days, and before it frosts, then you're going to chop off the tops of the carrots, all the greens or the beets or whatever, and then you could put a layer of sand and then just layer heavy with like leaves or wood chips, and that'll insulate the ground. And then that is your storage, right? Then as you need them, you come out. Yeah, you're gotta come out in the snow, dig it back, pull up your carrots that are still gonna be fresh because they didn't freeze, because you have insulation on them and they're under the ground, and that's where they're supposed to live and preserve themselves, because they want to stay alive until the next season, when guess what? Those roots are stored energy. They're kind of like a seed, but they're not, and they're gonna basically shoot up again and grow more carrot leaves and let the plant reproduce like it's supposed to. And I mean, so that's the ultimate storage. I mean, this is how they did the olden days before people had refrigeration. You could do that too. I don't think that would interfere, as long as you had a good separation layer of maybe sand on top, so that you know, things didn't bother the carrots down below. Yeah.
You've got 3 feet of snow on top of that too.
Yeah, and then the mycelium and mushrooms are not going to live where it's too cold, so they're going to only live at a certain point where you have insulation. Other than that, for good storage produce items are things like that you could grow in the desert, specifically, are dates. I mean, dates pretty much just don't go bad, but they are more of a dried fruit, which I don't necessarily eating a high dried fruit diet. And another one of my favorite produce, you know, fruits for storage that many people don't know of. How many people have had jujubes or Chinese dates? Oh my God, Chinese dates, you could eat them fresh, kind of like an apple. They're kind of like an apple when they're fresh, but when they're dried and you get it perfectly dried, oh my God, it's like, to me, it's like eating angel food cake. I don't eat angel food cake, but it's like, it has that nice spongy consistency. It's nice and sweet. And in Chinese medicine, it's like one of the highest level, like Chinese medicinal foods. And it just, actually in the desert, it grows like a weed. Right now in California, they're selling fresh fruits. And it's sad that I would any day of the week choose jujubes over dates. And the storability is wonderful as well. So these are some good produce if you need to grow produce for storage. I mean, obviously something like peaches, they totally don't store well. I mean, these peaches we got here, I mean, in a couple of days, they're just gonna be rotted, mold, because they have a soft skin, and that's just how they are. So you really should have, you know, you wanna plant different varieties of trees. So like on the peaches, you know, they have early peaches that'll fruit like early in the season. Like in Las Vegas where I live, they'll have peaches that fruit as early as May, and then they'll have some peaches that fruit early in July. So they have like, I don't know, orange glow or May glow peaches, and they could have Red Haven peaches. And so if you're growing to eat yourself, you want to always have early peaches and late peaches, so that you know, your early ones are coming in early, you're eating those, and then you get to go through all those, and then you have the late peaches ready. Because if you have like all these early trees and you have so much early fruit, but you can't eat it all or process it or store it, they're gonna go bad. But if you have early, you get to eat them, and then you have another month in between, and then you have late stuff, then you're gonna be able to eat more regularly. Now, aside from that, like if you do grow produce, and like say you lived here and you can't store it fresh, like say you want to, you know, you're growing peach trees and you want to be able to eat it for the winter, how are you going to eat peaches in the winter? Well, there's a few ways to do that. You could store your produce, and if you want to, so storing produce for shelf life, actually, I missed that, is to store your produce, like depending on the produce item, I could get some things to last longer than others. So like, I mean, they have this thing called the berry breeze. How many people have heard of that? Yeah, so anyways, a berry breeze is an ozone generator that you could put in your fridge that sucks through D batteries really fast. So you gotta get alkalines. And basically it creates ozone in your fridge, and because your fridge is sealed, it creates a nice ozone environment, and the ozone kills like bacteria and molds. So this allows your berries to stay fresher or not degrade or go bad, longer. So like maybe double the time that you could have berries like fresh, because we know when you buy fresh berries and they just go bad. I mean, this thing totally works. I have like 2 of them. I probably don't need 2 in each fridge, but sometimes a battery goes out and I miss it in one, so now I have them alternated. So if the battery goes out in one, the other one's working, and if not, they're both working, which is double the ozone, double the power now. More is always better, not always. But ozone can be quite toxic for us to breathe, so you don't want to use ozone purifiers, which I did make the mistake when I was younger. But for this case, in a sealed refrigeration, and when you open it, it just dissipates, and you're not going to get dosed with ozone. It's not be toxic to you. So that'll increase the storage time of the fruits you're growing or the ones you buy. I tend to buy a lot of fruits in bulk at the wholesale produce terminal in Los Angeles, then I bring it back to my place in Vegas, and then I need to store it, so it doesn't go bad before I get to eat it. So, proper temperature is critical, and different foods need different temperatures. I can't go into this in this talk, but I have a video on it where I show I have in the video I had 3 different fridges, and then I have a cooler all set at different temperature ranges. So my bell peppers go in my cooler that I have a thermostatic control for that stays around 46 to 50 degrees exactly. And that way I could keep bell peppers once they've been harvested, as long as I buy them in a good condition, for like a month without problems, without going bad. And then I have a fridge set to like 40 degrees for my more tropical fruits that don't like it too cold. Like I put my cucumbers in there, and then I have another fridge set to like 34 to 36 degrees where I keep my fresh juices, and also things like lettuce and apples. They like it a lot colder. Citrus also will deal with it colder. Cherries will like it colder. They'll stay fresher longer without going bad. And so that could increase the time of storage for the produce you are growing, or in my case, buying. Also, another inexpensive way they've been using forever are root cellars, just digging a hole in the ground, because the ground is nice and cool right here, even though the sun's hitting it down below a couple feet, it's nice, cool temperature. So that's how you could help increase the shelf life of the food you're growing. And then next is preserving your food for the winter. And so I should have put freezing on here, in addition to freeze drying, fermentation, and dehydration. So if you do have lots of food bounty in the summer, like if you lived here and you're not going to be able to grow anything in the winter, you got to put your food up. I met somebody from, I think, Norway or Sweden or something, and this is what they have to do over there. So over there, you could have berries in the season, you could have all these fruits, and you're going to freeze them and then eat them during the winter. Now, frozen fruits are not optimal. The problem with freezing fruit I have is that when you thaw them out, they're locked in, the freshness and the nutrients are locked in once you freeze them, but once they start to thaw out, then you've already exploded all the cell walls because the freezing process blew it all up, and then once it's thawed out, then it starts to oxidize really fast. So you want to thaw and eat as quickly as possible the food you had previously frozen for the highest quality nutrition, or most nutrition in my opinion, based on scientific studies. So the reason and then plus, if you got to freeze them, you got to make sure your freezer doesn't run out of electricity or everything will thaw, which my tenant did to me in California. I had a lot of stuff in my freezer there, and she had turned off the power to the house to save money because she was paying the electricity bill, and all my shit rotted, and it was nasty and maggots and But so anyways, so the better thing is to do what's called freeze drying, in my opinion. The freeze drying will remove the water in an oxygen deprived environment under vacuum, and this saves like 99% of the nutrients, according to what I've seen. And the taste and flavor is amazing, and it's a nice crunchy texture. I'm not really going to get into that. I have videos on this, but I travel with. Do what?
No oxidation issues.
I mean, it's after eating fresh. Freeze drying is the best because you freeze it, the nutrition's locked in, and then under vacuum, the moisture's pulled out. So there's like oxygen can't exist in a minimal oxygen exists in a vacuum. So there's little, if any, oxidative damage. So for example, if you put avocados in the dehydrator, they turn black. Oxidation, because you're running a fan pumping air through it with heat, In a freeze dry, I put sliced avocados and they come out looking like avocados without the water. And so, like, I don't see any oxidation. Now, once you take it out of the freeze dryer, not under vacuum anymore, you have to store it properly, or it can still oxidize and go bad. So I have videos on freeze dryers. You can look those up if you're interested. Fermentation is another method to use, and of course, dehydration, which is my last, preferred method personally, because it does a lot of damage in my opinion. And also, I don't like the chewy texture of many dehydrated foods. Also, kale. When you make kale chips in the dehydrator, the stems could like pierce the roof of your mouth, which I have done before, and I started bleeding. But in the freeze dryer, if you even take the thickest like kale stems, you take it out of the freeze dryer and it just crumbles in your hand like dust. It's amazing. So because it keeps, I don't know, it's just so cool. Anyways, so the question is, next thing is, so should you even eat dried fruits or fresh foods? And so, freshest is always bestest. I travel wherever I go. I always have a couple bags of freeze-dried fruits and vegetables, including my salads that I make from my winter harvest in my garden that I grew myself. And so like this trip, I have some freeze-dried stuff in my car for emergency. Like, the first thing I did when I got off the airplane is I just drove to the health food store to get fresh fruits and vegetables and some hydration, some liquids. So I have dried food as an emergency, and the only thing missing out of the freeze-dried food is actually the water content, which then I melt the water and then filter it, and then I drink the water from my freeze dryer, which is actually water from the fruits and vegetables that I freeze dried.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't have a video on that yet, but it's coming. But anyways, I want to encourage you guys always to eat fresh food. That's optimal. And if you lived in the tropics, then you actually can eat fresh year-round because you have always different fruit trees that are producing for you. Next is I want to talk about grow a variety of foods and why this is so important. Food variety and growing a variety of foods is super important because of number one, stability, right? A certain food you grow might have a pest, outbreak, but then another tree or plant or food will not. And what if you have only apples or only bananas and you have an outbreak, you could lose your entire crop, then you have no food to eat. But if you're diversified and have different kinds of trees, then you're more insulated from any problems that could happen when you're growing them. Now, the other reason why I think we should eat a variety and also grow a variety is because of the nutrition differences. I mean, plants are nothing more or less than chemical factories, right? They absorb the nutrients from the ground. The sun, they create their own energy from the sun as their little photosynthesis cells, and they create plant metabolites, or you could call them nutrients. A tomato plant can produce up to 300 different plant metabolites. You might want to call them phytochemicals or phytonutrients. And that's just totally amazing. And every plant's a little bit different. They produce a whole spectrum of chemicals. And some of these things are known as lycopenes or glucosinolates or anthocyanos. I mean, all these different compounds that are both researched and unresearched that have so many benefits on the body, like kales and collard greens and cruciferous vegetables are, powerful anti-cancer foods. And if you exclude these foods from your diet, in my opinion, you will not have as much and according to science, you won't have as much anti-cancer, fighting power in your bloodstream. And also, so variety for nutrition, and then also creates resilience, so you don't have crop failures. Also, to me, variety is super fun. Like, I would get so bored if I just had to eat a diet of banana, dates, and romaine lettuce. I mean, I might do it if somebody put a gun to my head, but like that'd be so freaking boring. I would go crazy. I wouldn't. Would I rather eat even conventional, just junk food that had a variety? Probably not. But but yeah, I mean, I have so many different leafy greens in my garden that I could eat and taste from, and they taste so different. Like, how many people have had water spinach here? Nobody. Wow. How many people have had Malabar spinach? All right, cool. 2 people. 3 people. How many people have had Okinawan spinach? Longevity spinach? 1 person. Cool. How many people have? I mean, I could just go down there. These are things that are just in my garden right now that I can't wait to get back home because I get to eat during the summertime when we have nice hot weather. Egyptian spinach is another one that's really common, in some cultures around the world. And people have just never tasted these. These are just cool nutrients, and also just different taste sensations. I mean, most people have had sorrel, all right, yeah. So kind of know the lemony flavor of sorrel. Like every different plant has different flavor compounds, and these are nutrients that are good for us. I have all these cool Asian vegetables that actually I flew to Dallas to buy 16 plants and brought them back to Vegas so I could grow them, because these plants are not available near me. So I kind of go crazy with this stuff, but it's just so fun. So getting back to some of the basics, how do you start growing your own food, right? And the easiest way, and I would encourage everybody to do this, and I always encourage everybody to do this, is grow sprouts and microgreens. Growing sprouts and microgreens is something, if you're living somewhere in a house or an RV or a camper or even a car, you can do. I gotta meet somebody living in a car that's growing their sprouts, because I'd like to make a video. But it's so easy, and sprouting seeds could just, you soak them and you drain them and you maybe put them in the sun, and then in like a couple, maybe even one day, like I could soak buckwheat for a half hour, put it in a mason jar under vacuum, get the water soaked in there, or rinse it, and then put it out in the sun in Vegas, and in one day, 24 hours, I have little tails that I could eat. And now I just grew my own food. And then eat it, because otherwise it gets longer and then it gets nasty tasting or dehydrated or something. So it's super simple. And sprouts and microgreens are some of the most nutritious leafy greens. I know some speakers here may not like sprouts and microgreens. I don't think we should have a sprout or microgreen based diet by any means. I think we should have a fruit based diet, meaning, for me that means 51% or more of my calories come from fruit. Generally I like to stay around maybe like, I don't know, right between 50 and 60%, because if you are eating too much fruit, then you're basically taking space away from vegetables that are so beneficial in my opinion and so nutritious. Also, sprouting your own food is the basis of being a good gardener. I'm not a good person that actually starts all my seeds that I grow in my garden. I buy a lot of plant starts because I'm not good. I'm good at sprouting, but I'm not good at like germinating seeds to grow, because the way I like to do it, I just take seeds and I throw them out in my garden, and whatever comes up is what comes up, and I let nature do all the work so I don't have to babysit them. And that's how it should be in my opinion. I don't have to like have these flats inside, but if you live in Canada and you have a 110-day season, you better start your plants inside while it's still cold outside so you get a nice jump on the season. So the next question is, most people don't live on acreage or have a farm. They live in a standard tract home. I live in a standard American tract home that's just cookie cutter with everybody right next to you, and your neighbors are, 10 feet away. But even on a small tract home property, I think my property is, I don't even know, like 8,000 square feet maybe total. It's not that big, in my house, it takes up a bunch. You can still grow a lot of food. And so how much food could you really grow? Well, it depends on what you're planting, right? My YouTube channel is called Growing Your Greens, and that's because I think greens are the most valuable food you can grow, not only because they're so expensive in the store. If you go price apples, I know the U.S. States prices could be like $1, $1.50 a pound, $2 a pound for apples. But if you price like leafy greens, it's like $3, $4 a pound. It's like significantly more money, and apple trees are great. But the problem is if you waste space in a limited space, like you have a tract home and you have an apple tree, that produces one time a year for you. The rest of the year it's sitting there doing nothing. It's literally taking up space. Whereas if I grow leafy greens, most of the year, every day of the year actually I have leafy greens in my climate, and if you rotate your plantings properly, easily you could do that and you'll never have to buy greens again. So it's a lot more effective use of the space, and that's why I buy fruits and grow my vegetables, because I'm on a limited space. But you could grow, in a small space, you could grow you could probably grow most of your vegetable needs if done properly. And I space things really anally. I get out a tape measure, to like, okay, each pepper plant is 11.5 inches from the next one on an interlocking kind of like diamond grid, so that when they grow, they'll basically just about touch each other, but then I'm not wasting any space. So you could grow a lot of food. So how do you start? And that depends on the scale of your project, your budget, and your time, right? I met somebody here that has 10 acres. And I mean, that's a lot bigger, that's a big chunk to deal with for 2 people, which they are, versus like a small residential home property. How many people live in a small residential home property? How many people live on acreage? How many people live in a condo or apartment and have no room? All right, not too many. But yeah, so even on a small place, I would recommend start small and grow big. Start off with a 4 foot by 4 foot raised bed garden. And that's just, if you've never done this before, that's a good size to start with so you could kind of get your feet wet. I converted my whole yard like pretty much at once, and that's a big project. But at the time I had a gardener guy that was like working pretty much, full time to help me make the project happen. And then I guess the next thing is you want to plant it properly. And that's the most important thing. Like before I started any of my projects, I had like graph paper and I like drew out the lines of my property. And then I basically, this is my backyard. And I put like, this is the raised bed. It's 4 feet. And then I'm going to have a walkway of 18 inches. And then like, I got the next 4 foot bed and it's going to be 15 feet long. And I could have a walkway in the end that goes up to my door that's like 36 inches wide. So I could get a wheelbarrow up it if I need to move materials. And if you have a 10-acre property, you're going to want to say, hey, over here I'm going to have my fruit tree orchard. Over here I'm going to have my vegetable garden. Over here I'm going to have my herbs right by my kitchen, so I could just go out my back door and harvest herbs whenever I'm going to cook. And so, I would always encourage you guys not to plant things haphazardly, and also understand how plants grow. That's super important. Like, if you're new into gardening, you're going to plant tomatoes next to a lettuce plant or something, and the tomato will get so big it's just going to crowd out and shade out the lettuce plant that's going to stay relatively small. So I generally plant tomatoes amongst themselves, and I have lettuces amongst themselves. Sometimes I'll plant, similar things. Like I always plant basil and peppers next to each other because they kind of stay almost a similar height. And then the next is building your soil microbiome. So that's very important. Our microbiome, which some speakers here have talked about, some others haven't. They're the beneficial organisms, microbes, yeast, bacteria, that literally make food grow in the end if it's being done properly. That system is being subverted in many commercial systems where they're just feeding water-soluble fertilizers, such as in hydroponics or even conventionally grown food where they're using water-soluble nutrients. That's basically like taking like the plants living on Ensure, which is liquid vitamins for old people, which we know are deficient in a lot of things. But that's what most crops are being fed with, these liquid, vitamins or minerals for the most part, subverting nature's systems where, there's microbes that live on the roots. Most people don't know that as the sun's hitting this grass right here, the grass is sweet. I wouldn't eat this grass personally, but if it was not sprayed and I knew the source, you could pick up the grass and eat it. And some wheatgrass is actually quite sweet. How many people have had sweet wheatgrass juice? Yeah, so it's really sweet. So even grasses will make sugars, right? And what most people don't know is that the sugars don't necessarily go into the blades of grass. The plant is actually sending more of the sugars down into the root system than actually into the blades of grass. Now, why would they do this? That's because they know that they have a symbiosis with the bacteria and the soil microbes, and they want to feed them because the better they could feed the soil microbes, the better they could absorb nutrients, because it's these soil microbes allow them to absorb nutrients from the soil and convert inorganic minerals into being ones that they could take in and absorb into their little cell structures. And that's why it's so important for our microbiome on our skin, in our guts, wherever, to be working properly, because it also helps us digest our food, as we know. But in addition, the bacteria in us make secondary metabolites. And these are things like, I don't know, what's the name of the secondary metabolite that's like super popular? It's like an antioxidant. I know there's so many different things that the bacteria makes based on eating the fiber that we're eating, that then give us nutrients and antioxidants that we would not otherwise have because of them. That also happens in the soil. So for that reason, that's why it's really important for me to build the soil, to have the right microorganisms in there, because guess what? The microorganisms in the soil and the microorganisms in us, we share so many of them. The microorganisms aren't in the soil, and you're not eating dirty produce sometimes, or something that's not washed or less washed. You're not going to get your local microbiome organisms that, in my opinion, of course, there's bad organisms, but in a good system that's well balanced, nature is self-balancing, right? So they're going to be the majority of good organisms without a lot of the bad ones. And of course, I don't encourage the use of manure-based fertilizers that could have bad organisms, and that's why they have cantaloupe and spinach outbreaks from E. coli and all these things because of, they're using non-properly composted animal manures. So we want to build the soil microbiome. It's for not only the soil, but also for the plants, also for the earth, because the topsoils are just being degraded because of the improper farming practices, and for people and for our health. And so if you want to look up more on this, do a Google search on food soil web, and you're going to learn more than you've ever wanted to know about this. Next is how to feed your fruit trees and vegetables, right? So, people want to buy these bag fertilizers, go down to the feed store, go down to the fertilizer store, go to the nursery, and buy these fertilizers to put in because that's what we're supposed to use, right? Well, that's like us eating supplements, in my opinion. We want to give ourselves a natural diet, which in my opinion are fruits and vegetables and other plant foods. And the natural plant foods for grasses and trees are grasses and trees. Because in nature, the grass, in the wintertime, all this grass is going to croak, it's going to turn brown, it's going to sit here, the snow is going to fall on it, and guess what? This is going to compost in place. Worms and bugs and creatures and microbes are going to eat it. That's going to go back into the soil to feed the soil for next year, right? In an optimal system. In the forest, trees drop over, they get eaten by termites and animals eat it, and the leaves basically compost and get graded down by microbes and microorganisms and fungi, bacteria, and then that turns into soil for the next year. There's no fertilizer pixies sprinkling 10-10-10 fertilizers in the forest or anywhere, and so that's what we want to try to duplicate in nature. And when you do this, then you have higher quality food because we're duplicating nature. In addition, we got all the microbes in there. And the other thing is, in addition to just supplementing with nature's resources, I also like to bring in other things that may be depleted in an optimal system, such as the trace minerals. So the trace minerals are existing all over the planet. Now the challenge with the trace minerals that some of the speakers have talked about is that is not in the food that we're consuming, because in standard agriculture practices, most people say they talk about 3 minerals, which is true. Most agronomists that are in the real world, might talk up to 15 or 16 different minerals that plants really need to grow optimally. So yeah, your food may have 16 minerals that they're really actively paying attention to if the farmer's really up on it. Otherwise, they're probably just adding 3. But then, I add 70 to 90 different trace minerals into my soil, into my garden on a regular and continual basis. Because here's the thing, if we go into land, maybe just like that nice patch of forest over there, right? That patch of forest is some of the most fertile ground here, definitely more fertile than this lawn that's been here for a long time. But if we carve down that forest and turn it into nothing, and we harvest the trees and they sell them for money, and then we plant vegetables there. The first year we plant vegetables, the vegetables are going to be huge because the soil fertility is so high, but then we're going to harvest the tomatoes or whatever we're growing there. We're going to pull them off the land. Maybe it's even cannabis because it's legal here. And they're going to pull off the cannabis. There's going to be huge cannabis buds, like fatter than you ever seen in your whole life, whatever. They can make a bunch of money off it. And then they grow the next year, and then they're a little bit smaller, or maybe even smaller. And then the next year they grow it that's smaller, and then finally one year they're going to grow it that you can't get any cannabis buds. This land sucks. Well, that's because every year when they're pulling off cannabis buds, besides having the THC, the CBD, the terpenes, and all these different things, the nutrients are being sucked out of the earth, put into the plant, that then they're removing off-site to sell to make money, and they're not adding the equivalent amount of minerals and things back into the soil to make the soil fertile again. And that's why they think that you could bring in a couple bags of fertilizer and replace what nature, God, whoever you believe in, has put there over the millions of years it's been there. Not happening, guys. So, that's why it's important to keep amending the minerals as you're pulling crops out, your crop residues that you're not pulling offsite. So like if I harvest my tomatoes, I eat my tomatoes, but all the leaves from my tomato plants go back into my compost that then get turned into compost that then I put back in my soil. In addition, I add additional rock dust, trace minerals, and ocean-based trace minerals to my soil to ensure that I'm going to have the highest quality food that's, agribusiness is not doing. So anyways, wood chips and leaves versus compost. So most often places use compost to add nutrition to their soil, and compost is a broad term. Compost could be anything from composted animal manures to, composted wood chips to, maybe even composted human poop, which there's a product called Mill Organite in the States that actually some farms unfortunately used. I don't believe they should be using that to grow human food, but is being used to grow a lot of animal foods, and then that human poop is being used to grow animal foods that then they feed the animal the poop grown animal foods, and then the cows poop that back out, and then now we use their poop to grow human foods, which is totally sick. So if you think you're being vegan and you're eating, you're not eating animals and all this stuff, the food you're being grown, especially if you're growing or eating organic, most likely grown with cow manure or some other kind of manure that is from, unfortunately, animal agriculture industry. So I mean, it just like the levels of things that I've researched, and it's just like you just start learning about. It's like you almost don't want to know, but it's just the truth. And this motivates me to teach gardening and teach people about not using animal manures, especially from factory farms. And if you have your own animals that are herbivorous, and you want to compost their stuff, you have a neighbor down the street that treats their animals properly, feeds them well without antibiotics and all these drugs and chemicals. I don't really have a problem with that, but my goal is to minimally use any manures. It's really not necessary to grow food.
What about pasteurize, if they pasteurize the manure?
Oh, so if the pasteurization, so they're just heating manure. So the only thing that does, it kills all the bad bacteria, so you won't get sick from it. But still, the nutrients or the fertilizer you're using to grow your food is going to be the quality of your food. So if you're just getting cheap ass, they're feeding their cows GMO corn and soy, and the GMO corn and soy are fed, 3 minerals, NPK, then what's going to be in your food? Well, it's the NPK minerals that they use to grow the food for the cows, less whatever the cow took out, and then now that's what you're going to be getting. So I think that, in my opinion, I would consider that depleted. Whereas if you just collect some trees or some leaves from the forest there that's been growing there undisturbed in a nature system that's been recycling minerals all this time with minimal man influence aside from the planes flying overhead and radiation from Fukushima flying over years ago, I think that's a lot better. So for that reason, why I'm not a big fan of using industrial made compost, much like I'm not a big fan of industrial made food, which is if you go to a Home Depot or a big box store or whatever, or a garden center, you're going to buy these industrial bags of compost that basically are there for profit because they're made in a short period of time in as little as a month or two. And some, in case of the manure products, they're just bagging up shit and selling it, and you're paying a couple bucks for it, which most farmers that are organic will just use manure, which that's not the way. The way is to get wood chips and leaves, and if you don't have a forest near you, call a local arborist and get wood chips or leaves dumped off on your property. Like I met the people that have a 10-acre property. I'm like, get as many free wood chips and leaves as you can and just start making piles, because wood chips could take up to 3 years to break down to turn into soil on their own without adding any kind of nitrogen, because they're high carbon. We want the fungal degraders and mushrooms to break these things down slowly to make the highest nutritious soil. And then I visited a guy here in Kelowna, and a video will be coming out soon on my Growing Your Greens channel, who does what's called mulch gardening. So mulch gardening is a lot better. It's basically taking leaves, and the leaves, instead of taking 3 years to break down like wood chips, they break down within a season. So he'll collect all the leaves in the fall. He'll put them out in the fall, like two feet deep on his property. It'll get snowed on, and then the snow will compress the leaves down. It'll keep the ground warm because that actually acts as insulation. This allows his earthworms, even here in Kelowna, to live year round. Also encourages the soil microbiome and the soil bacteria that slow down when it gets cold. That's why the refrigeration is good to keep your food fresher longer, because it slows down the bacterial growth and from things eating your food. But it also slows down them from working in the soil. But when he has that layer on there, they're still kind of more actively working to break things down faster. And then literally in the spring, he'll just, there'll be a little small layer of leaves at that point. He'll dig it back. It'll have nice black ground in there. And he's been doing this for 20 years now on the property I visited. And he has some of the best soil. And I mean, he has corn. It's called Cusco corn. His Cusco corn, 2 of the guys here went with me to the farm and they saw it. It's 20 feet tall, these corn stalks. It's like the tallest corn stalks I've ever seen in my life. It was totally amazing. And he has he grew one of the world's record longest 42-inch cucumbers, and then he pickled it. And I guess he was even on Canadian news or something at some point, Good Morning America or some crap way many years ago, for growing a long cucumber. And he pickled it because he also does fermentation. But that's another topic. But anyway, so leaves and wood chips are your best friend. you know, in my situation where I have a small property, I don't have space to pile up wood chips or leaves and let them degrade down over time. So I like to try to find good sources or good people that have already been doing that for me, and I could just buy the finished product, so let them rot the stuff for 3 years, and then I'll bring it in. I think if you're in Maryland, they actually have a company that actually will compost 100% leaves in a leaf mold compost. Of course, I do have a leaf mold pile in California that is still degrading. I'm gonna have some good stuff when I do harvest it. But I guess, and once again, it's do the best you can. If the only thing you can get is compost, you know, that's better than not doing it. And like, oh, John says I got to use these leaves and wood chips. I'm not going to do it until 3 years. No, get whatever you can get now, but get the wood chips if you have space to let them break down over the years. And if you should ever get acreage, you want to try getting these resources and letting them break down even before you plant. You know, like the couple that has 10 acres, I'm like, get as many wood chips. And even if you know your orchard's going to go there now, just get wood chips dumped there and let them keep breaking down, because by the time you finally get to plant, it'll be really nice and fertile because it's just a grassland and open area now that's being exposed. So the next is sourcing planting materials, seeds, plants, cuttings, or trees, which are best. So I mean, you could save the seeds of the fruits you're eating today and plant them and grow them. Some seeds are called true to seed, which means if you ate a peach and it's a Saturn peach, which are actually the small donut peaches, and you take the seed out and you plant it, it'll be a Saturn peach tree just like the one you ate. Many trees are not true to seed, so then if you eat that seed you planted, you might get a totally funky different kind of peach, not the kind that you planted, and you have to look up which ones are true to seed and which ones aren't. Apples are not true to seed, and so if you get an apple and you eat the apple, wow, this is a good apple, you plant the seed, you're going to get an apple tree, but it probably is not going to be the same exact apple, which could be good or bad, but the problem is you won't know until maybe 7 years later. I planted loquat tree seeds. How many people have eaten loquats? A couple. So loquat seeds, I planted it, and it took, oh my God, it's like 7 years later, it's got a nice tree there, but there's no fruit. I think the 8th year it finally fruited. And so that's like, you know, that was kind of cool to see literally what I planted from, I dug a hole one day and put a bunch of seeds in there, and I saw my fruition finally. But some trees could be super long. And plus, then you don't know the variety. So like on loquats, I just had a wild variety, which I'm good with because I enriched the soil and I had good, nice fruit quality. But you could buy varieties of trees that are going to actually have excellent fruit quality because they are bred for higher sugar content, higher fruit pulp content, because loquats are kind of more of a wild fruit without, I mean, they have big seeds and they have like that much like fruit layer on it when you're eating it, so you got to eat a lot. So for that reason, I would recommend actually starting with, you know, cuttings. So if you like, fig trees are really easy. You see a fig tree, you could cut a branch off, literally stick it in the ground and keep it watered, and it'll actually grow roots and make a whole new tree. Same with mulberries. You know, certain trees could do that. Most, you can't do that with an apple and stuff, but some trees could do that. With apples, you could do what's called grafting. So you could grow like an apple from a seed, get a tree that's going to be a junk because you don't know what it is. You could cut it off and then take a branch from an apple tree and basically paste it on there. Like if I had to get my arm cut off and you needed my arm, you could cut off my arm and sew it on you. That doesn't work, but you could do that with certain fruit trees. Please don't take my arm. But so that's really cool. So then once you transplant that fruit tree that's producing onto the rootstock of the seed, then pretty much that same year, the next year, you could get fruit even, which is really cool. So buying grafted trees is a really good method to, you know, start your food forest off. I always encourage everybody to buy the biggest tree you could afford. So it depends if you have more time than money. Small trees and 5-gallon pots are maybe, you know, in the States, $20 to $30. I got some on clearance at Walmart last year for 3 cents, which is really cool. So I bought like 40 plants for 3 cents a tree. The problem was the cashiers did not want to sell me 3-cent fruit trees that had $30 price stickers on them. So I had to work a way around that. I basically went to the self-checkout and I would buy like a $100 juicer and I'd ring that through with some stupid other items and then ring my fruit trees through. So my bill was like $150. And the fruit trees were $3, and then I'd walk out of the store with all that, and they wouldn't question it because, like, you know, they'd see the total. And then I'd come back later and return all the stupid shit I bought just to buy the fruit trees for 3 cents. And then one time it was really funny because the security guard was watching me ring up my 3-cent fruit trees, and I saw him on the monitor, like, because when you do self-checkout, they could monitor it. he's watching that shit, and I'm kind of seeing him. He's like, his eyes light up because he's like, oh, I fucking caught a guy stealing. And I could see him calling on the phone. And then when I'm going to check out, I'm like, he's going to come up to me. I know it. But I'm like, I'm not doing anything illegal. It's honestly in their system. It's a markdown. They probably should destroy him and not sell him. But nonetheless, so I'm walking out and he checks. He sees the receipt. I'm like, yeah, they're 3-cent fruit trees. I'm like, I didn't change the price. That's just what they are. I'm like, you could call your manager. You could call the home office. I don't care. It's scanned up. And he let me go. Anyways, so now I have them all. They're in 5-gallon pots, and I move up to 15-gallon because I'm going to plant some in my ground, but that's another topic. But yeah, so always encourage you guys actually to buy trees. And then, then I want to talk about the viability of seeds. So say you eat a really good, I don't know, durian, right? And you want to save the seed of the durian and plant it when you move to the tropics in 10 years or 5 years or maybe even next year. Certain seeds could last a long time, like dates I talked about earlier. Date pits could last indefinitely, right? Well, almost indefinitely. But durian and tropical fruit seeds have a very short viability. Like as soon as they dry out, some of them could be no longer viable and no longer good. So it's very important to store them properly. If you do want to plant them, like I think you got to pack durian in like a nice paper towel and send it and grow it immediately. But if you sprout it and grow it into a tree, then you could of course take that tree wherever you want once it's sprouted. But some seeds do not germinate, so don't think, oh, I'm going to save this good seed from whatever and it's going to germinate. So papaya seeds, I think they store fairly well. They're not because you could buy packs of papaya seeds that'll germinate, and then that's in so tropical fruits that are meant to basically drop to the ground and then regrow usually have short viability. Seeds of temperate climate fruits, kind of like here, apples and things, would have longer viability in general, not as a rule. So for example, pawpaws are one of my favorite fruits. How many people have eaten pawpaws? Yeah, they're so delicious. Kind of tastes like mango, but they're a temperate climate, so they would likely even grow here because they grow in Michigan and where was I when I got them? Ohio, yeah, they're from Ohio and stuff. Yeah, northern states, actually, they don't grow in the tropics, which is this is one of them. It reminds me of eating a mango/banana.
I heard Ohio has really good.
Yeah, I got them I think I was in Maryland, actually, when I got them. But yeah, but those seeds actually need to have a period of cold storage or they're not viable.
Wow.
Because they know they want the fruits to drop. It wants to go through a cold spell like the winter, and then it's going to sprout. So I saved all the seeds and I put them in my fridge so they have that cold spell. So when I do want to germinate them, or send them to somebody, they're ready to go. And I guess, the other thing is I want everybody to start now. How many people are already currently growing some food? How many people will grow some food after this talk? At least some sprouts. Get something growing. And I mean, that's pretty much it. So yes, it is possible to grow enough fruits and vegetables to live on. You will need a lot of space, but I want everybody to at least displace some of the food that they're eating from food you grow because it's going to be significantly higher quality. Plus, it's also a good learning experience. I mean, as being a plant-based eater, and I like to say, well, I don't really call myself vegan, but I don't want to hurt animals. I don't believe there's a need to kill them to eat them. Becoming a gardener really kind of took me to the next level because now I had to think about what do I do with all these bugs and creatures that are not going to either eat my stuff or I have to do something to them so that I'm eating instead of them. And to me, if they're visiting my garden, they're freeloaders in my garden, they're eating the crops that I'm growing for me. Now, I'm not growing it for them. So, I mean, that gets into a whole nother topic, which, I could talk a lot about is the quality of the food you're growing. And I have a, there's a reason why I stood up. I have this chart here. And, we talk about nutrition a lot, and this is another talk I give. I'll probably talk about this more tomorrow. But I'll hand this around. I need this back because it's my only copy. But this is grocery store green beans and garden beans, not even grown under ideal conditions. And their nutritional differences where they sent it off to the lab and they checked the magnesium, zinc, iron, copper, potassium, phosphorus, calcium, and protein. And the garden beans that are grown not even under ideal conditions had, almost twice as much protein for the same amount of beans, had almost twice as much calcium, had over 3 times the amount of potassium. So let's not be deficient as vegans and raw eaters or fruitarians. And I mean, homegrown food, higher quality food can have significantly more nutrition. I mean, if you're deficient in zinc, if you're a guy, the zinc was over twice as much in homegrown stuff. And so this is the differences that home growing can make, and I really want to encourage you guys. We'll pass this around so you guys can look at it. I want you guys to, take some steps to start growing your own food. It does make a difference. The taste is different. Like I was glad I took these guys today who are like, I would say they eat a lot of fruit and they don't really see the value of vegetables, and they think, oh, vegetables are the same, they don't really taste good. I wouldn't go out to nature and just desire to eat vegetables, but I would desire eating fruit off the plant. And I took these guys to this guy's farm who's growing in the mulch garden, who I will say definitely has high quality stuff, because I've tasted a lot of stuff. No, not going there. And then they ate some of the greens. I'm like, here, try this. And they're like, wow, greens actually could taste good picked right from the plant, because it's actually fresh picked, grown in really good soil. And I mean, plants, if grown properly, they'll all have a sweetness to them. They'll have a flavor depth. And these are the phytonutrients and phytochemicals that make the flavor depth. It's not just sweetness. On the Brix meter that I have in my pocket, the Brix meter, people think that it like only measures sugar, which I will use this tomorrow at the farm, but it measures like sugar, protein, mineral content all in one. So that's a good accurate measure to see how you're doing as a gardener. And if your Brix is low, that's a good thing, because now this says whatever I'm doing now hasn't worked. Let's see how we can improve my Brix. I mean, our taste buds are our best Brix meters. You don't need to buy a $20 tool, which I think everybody serious about their health should have a Brix meter to check their produce quality, because at least, it doesn't check everything, but at least it tells you something that is physical. People could think, people are maybe eating the peaches here. Oh, these are such good peaches. To me, these are kind of like really kind of shit peaches that they're serving here, personally. The nectarines are definitely better. I won't even eat the peaches now, but I'll eat the nectarines of the ones I've checked so far. But like, that's because I have a reference point. I know good peaches because I've had really good peaches before, and I've verified it. And I've verified the peach quality here, which on the list, the peaches here were like 9. And if you look on the list, I think 9 peaches are like, maybe even between poor and good, if that. The nectarines were like 14 that I tasted. So eat more nectarines, guys. I think I have a few minutes for questions, or I'm out of time. I don't really know. But I am here for the rest of the event. If you have any questions at any time, just when you see me free, come up and talk to me. I'm glad to answer any questions. And I know a lot of things, but I don't know everything. Thank you.